On today's show, store manager of Collector's Edge Comics and independent writer, illustrator Kurt Wood, and owner-operator of Neptune Comics, Craig Lopasinski, right here on Inside the Cover. The Illuminati is back making waves. It's Justice League versus Justice League. We'll talk to a local innovator of digital comics, Tim Demeter, and we're going to examine the phenomenon of comics on screen from Avengers to The Walking Dead. But first, it's been a crazy year in comics already, and we're not even a quarter done. Batman has had it rough since Flashpoint. Kurt, why don't you tell us why Death of a Family will have such an impact going forward?
Well, it really shakes up the status quo of Batman and his family of books. The supporting cast of characters, Nightwing, the Robins, Batgirl, don't have a lot of reason to trust him right now. And from that, you're going to get a lot of good character stories and hopefully some development that takes us down the road for some really big epic stories.
Excellent. Craig?
Well, I think, everything goes in cycles and change, and this is one way of shaking up the whole status quo of what Batman's been through. Batman's always been kind of a character that's been one of those always having stuff go bad for him, and then he comes up and because he's the hero. And so I think you're going to see a lot of stories come out of this. Just this week is going to be Batman Incorporated number 8, and I think there's going to be a big game changer in that's going to really affect Bruce and Batman. And so that's what they do. This is comic books, and they have to make things interesting, otherwise we won't read them.
Excellent. Why don't we talk about where Batman has come from through Flashpoint now into Death of a Family, some changes from Flashpoint to Death of a Family that we've seen now that as we're moving forward, what else, the dimensions that he's already changed, how much more Batman, what we saw difference between one to the other.
Well, I think DC, between Flashpoint was an alternate reality type of Batman, and I'm not going to give away the story, but it wasn't Bruce Wayne as Batman. And then DC went through a whole new 52. They made Bruce younger, looking younger. They had 5 Robins at a timeline of 5 Robins in 5 years. So they did a lot to try to bring in younger readers, the teenage readers that comic books really should focus on. And so they've been doing that, and they've been telling some really good stories in Batman with Night of the Owls and Court of the Owls, and now Death of a Family. I think it's Batman is always going to be Batman, and you're going to see a lot of changes in him now. They'll probably go back to status quo a little bit later, but it makes for a good story.
Excellent. Did you see an influx at all in comic books of younger readers? You said that they were trying to appeal to. Did you see more people coming in, or did you find more people asking questions, confused about why we have 5 Robins at one point in time?
When you're dealing with fans of comic books, they really hate change. So a lot of the DC readers at that time said that they were going to disown DC Comics, never read another DC comic book ever again. But the numbers have shown that they haven't gone away, and that there have been more readers coming online, or not online, but in our shops, to read the comic books.
Kurt, same kind of.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the Robins and the confusion that can come with new readers, especially young readers, the general public, especially with the Batman stuff, kind of has preconceived notions of what things are. I mean, God, you ask my mom, who's been watching Batman, since 1966. In her mind, Dick Grayson is still Robin, and for a lot of the country and a lot of the readership, that's the way it is. So with young readers, they don't know that. They know the current Robin, and people from 10 years ago know the Robin from then. So you can come in at any point and read a comic, and you just kind of have to adapt to it. In the case of Batman, DC tends to like to kind of paint him as a unbelievably as an insecure character, not very trusting, especially of those closest around him. Not exactly my cup of tea, but it seems to be what readers are looking for right now in the character. And they're doing that very well. So something for new readers to get into.
So after 70 years, we'll see much more out of Batman.
It's like James Bond. You can just keep changing the status quo slightly, change the character a little bit. As long as the core elements are the same, you have unlimited potential for stories.
So DC knows what they're doing. Got it.
To a point.
To a point, yeah.
Well, we will switch over to Marvel here. Talk a little bit about Spider-Man 700 now. Doc Ock is now Spider-Man. We definitely have a lot to talk on that. Craig, what have readers been feeling? What have you been feeling even on it?
Again, you have change in the comic book world. So every time a big change like this happens in comics, the fan base just goes ballistic. And with the power of the internet now, their voices are even louder, and it's like having a megaphone. And they just go crazy when any little bit changes from their norm. So when Peter Parker dies, not really, but dies, and now it's Dr. Octavius, they live in the now moment, and they don't look into the future. They're like, the author or the publisher has an idea for a story. They want to change stuff so they get new readers to maybe, and it's all about sales, so they want more sales. So they change things up a bit, slap a new #1 on a book, sells bajillions copies, and they're happy. When that starts going down, you'll see Marvel go, hey, here's Peter Parker again. He's back, and a new #1, and sales will go through the roof. And people have to just realize comic books will always kind of come back, or these superhero comic books will always kind of come back and be what they want it to be. They just have to wait a little while the story plays out, and it'll add to the history of that character.
Excellent. I think that you have anything to add on that?
I mean, yeah, just a little. I mean, it's the one thing to keep in mind too is with the readers, I always preach, wait to see the story as it unfolds. You can have the snap judgment of, oh, it's now Doc Ock as Spider-Man, I'm never going to read this again, right? But then if you didn't read the first issue of the next series, you don't get to find out that Peter's still there. And they're sharing a body, and there's a story about Peter.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler. I'll have to read in the comic. But you see there's a potential for a storyline. So always don't be too rash to judge.
Excellent. Like music and books before it, the world of comics is moving, whether it's desired or not, towards the digital age. Today's profile will focus on Tim Demeter, a Milwaukee native who's been helping us get there.
I'm Tim Demeter. I'm a comic book artist, author, editor, digital innovator. I've been doing comics seriously probably since I've been in high school. I got into it just by way of really liking drawing. I'm really into stories, whether it's books, movies, comics, anything. And I also am kind of a independent artist. I don't always play well with others, so comics was a great medium for me to get into where I could do the whole thing myself. I could come up with the story, I could execute it. Now you can even put it online. Like many people my age who are into comics, they'll cite the 90s X-Men cartoon as the thing that really sucked them in. I thought Wolverine was the coolest thing I'd ever seen, and couldn't get enough of the show. My brother bought me a couple of comics for my birthday one year, and it was all downhill from then. Reckless Life is by far the biggest project in comics that I've undertaken. It's my own thing. I developed it, I drew it, I wrote it. If they'd have let me run the printing presses, I would have done that too. It's about 350 pages when I think all is said and done. And it comes from a character that I had been developing really since high school. But in that time, that character went through lots of evolution. It started as more of a violent crime story where the lead character was a hitman. Then it kind of drifted towards him being a thief. It then drifted to him being a little bit more of a lighthearted thief. And it ended up being kind of an action comedy-ish Ocean's 11 thing. It was pretty popular at the time, and I'm incredibly appreciative of the thousands of people that read it online, the people that would come to Chicago Comic-Con and buy the books from me, and the people that will still hassle me kind of to this day and say, hey, is this ever going to come back online? I swear that at some point it will. Click Wheel was something that I got involved with while I was also involved with Graphic Smash. and it was at the time just putting JPEGs of comics on iPod videos, which was pretty cool at the time. This is way before iPads and iPhones and things like that. I got my first iPod video through some images of my comics on there and thought it looked amazing. Like the screens, even then, they're nice, and it almost looked better than it did on a monitor. I knew one of my pals from Graphic Smash was involved in ClickWheel, so I talked to him, and he said, yep, absolutely, get Reckless Life over on ClickWheel, let's go. I was involved with them starting as a creator, but being the kind of guy that I tend to be, I was always being like, hey, you should try this, and you should try that, and you should try this. Eventually, they said, Tim, if you're going to keep telling us what to do, why don't you just come work for us? So I did. So that's how I got involved with them. Then as, iPhones and iOS started coming out, ClickWheel had since been purchased by a video game company. So now we had some resources. The reason, we had a good relationship with Apple. The video game developer was drawing the interest of Apple because they were into games. So we were lucky enough to get the iPhone SDK at the very, very beginning, along with everyone else that was lucky enough to get it right away. Lucky or unlucky, because we got to beta test it for Apple, basically, and creating that first app was challenging. Apple kind of made it sound like it was going to be a box of Legos, you dump it out and you put an app together, and that's not the case. People have since figured that out and realized that creating an app is a big and time-consuming, expensive experience, but we were figuring this out along with Apple. So as we were already doing comics on iPods, it just made sense to create some kind of reader to do something for iPhone. So the ClickWheel reader is what we ended up putting out. It was a good first try, and we were the first comics app on the App Store, and that's something to be proud of. Well, I'm drastically biased on my opinions about digital comics. I don't think it's not whether it's a good or a bad thing. It's ultimately going to be a necessary thing. It's just easier, and it's just the way everything's going. I live a few blocks from a comic shop. I never go there because I can get them on my iPad without having to go anywhere, and the reading experience I think is better. Not everybody would agree with that, but I like it. And I've only got so much room in this house, so keeping them on a hard drive is much more space efficient than keeping them in long boxes. You'll get your monthly fix of X-Men or whatever, through your iPad, but maybe there's a storyline that you love and you buy the hardbound edition because you want it on your shelf. That's where I think that's going. I don't think print is ever going to go away entirely. I think what you're going to see happening, both with printed comics and with printed books for that matter too, is digital is kind of the new paperback, or in the sake of comics, the new monthly. You'll see hardbound novels still being produced. You'll see collections of comics still being produced, and probably the production values will be a little bit higher. As far as creating original content for the web, I think eventually all of their content is going to be original to the web, and that whole idea will just become a moot point, because I really do think the day will come where there won't be a lot of monthly titles being printed. Maybe some of the super popular ones that do show up in Barnes & Noble, but you'll be able to get Spider-Man printed monthly, but if you want something that's further down the rack, like She-Hulk or something, it's more of a niche book, that one's probably only going to be available digitally.
Okay, so with both of you working daily on opposite sides of the digital fence, do you agree, or do you perhaps see an alternate future? Craig?
Well, I think you're going to see, like he was explaining, you're going to see kind of a mesh between the two. I hope for my business, I hope that we don't see a lot of people moving toward digital and not come into our stores, because I think our stores have a lot to offer a general reader that digital doesn't offer. The interaction between, toot my own horn, but the interaction between me and Kurt, to our customers, we can offer a lot of information that a customer might not have. And so I hope that people still come into our stores. But I do believe that digital is the way of the future, and they are going to they're already offering new content on the digital platform, and not offering it at the newsstand. But I still think there's a lot of collectors out there that still want the book in hand. They want the piece of paper to read. And plus, I know myself, I've had computers crash and that all goes away and I can't get anything back. Whereas you have a piece of comic book in your hand, maybe it burns in a fire or a flood or something and you lose it, but that's a lot more improbable than your hard drive getting wiped out.
Do you think it's actually caused more young readers to come in to your store that started with this digital kind of thing, and now you see them advancing to coming into your store and actually getting a hands-on experience with a book in hand like you were talking about?
Not yet. Not the younger readers. Not yet.
Okay.
I think the younger readers are more into video games and playing the video game stuff digitally, where you have older folks that will pay iTunes or whatever and pay for that digital download onto their iPad, and then they'll read it and they'll be like, oh wow, okay, yeah, I kind of like this. I kind of want to. I was in comic books back in the 90s, but now this kind of rejuvenated me. I want to come back in. I want to read some more, so they'll come into our stores and they'll say, what do you got in, their favorite character, Batman, Spider-Man, Hulk, whatever.
Okay, and you've been working with a lot of digital work yourself. Now you started doing more print work at first.
Yeah.
And now talk about a little bit how the transition works for you, how much different it is for you to create on paper and then have to turn it into a digital setting.
It's not all that different from what I usually do if I was creating work for a print comic. Now some guys, they're very elaborate with what they do. They use the computer effects more, fade ins, fade outs, page turns. From my end, it's not much different than scanning in my original artwork and setting it up for print. For my purposes, I'm just loading it onto a website and putting it up there for free, and people can click on it and read it that way. So it's really not all that different for me. But again, some guys, they really get into it and they show the true potential of what digital can bring as far as a storytelling tool. Things you just can't do with the static page. So from that aspect, there's a lot of growth, a lot of possibilities for digital. But at the end of the day, I still prefer having that physical copy,
Having it there.
Absolutely, yeah.
Something for...
Yeah, younger kids, digital, it's the iTunes generation, it's the Xbox generation. They're gonna be very comfortable with getting their comic on their iPad, on their computer, on their video game system, and sitting in a room alone and reading it. Whereas Craig was saying, you come into a shop and there's a camaraderie there. One of the best things about our hobby is being around other people that read the stuff you read. Even if you disagree on stuff, you can have those discussions and that human interaction. And I just don't think you get that with the younger generation if there is a younger generation coming into comics.
Excellent. So I think you both are in agreement that the digital age is happening. It's going to continue to
it's a
keep
good
happening.
Thing. Yeah, it's a good thing.
And it's a good thing for where it allows more people to see what you're doing, kind of. And I guess you can agree to that too, to some extent, that one way or another, it's going to bring more readers into.
Hopefully. At least that's what we're hoping.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what they keep telling us, so that's what we'll expect to happen. All right, great. Well, since the inception of television, comic book characters have been gracing the screen. They've had their ups and their downs, but not since Batman debuted in 1966 has a comic show truly been a phenomenon. Correct?
I wouldn't say.
We started something last night. I was attacked.
Won't get caught sleeping again.
Governor's on the way to the prison right now. We gotta fight to the death.
He's coming. We're going to war. That ends now.
So here we are.
We have a lot to talk about.
The Walking Dead returns Sunday, February 10th at 9, only on AMC.
12.3 million people tuned in to watch that episode. In key demographics, they beat shows like Modern Family, Big Bang Theory, and NCIS. What is it about the show that makes it so successful when other comic book shows that involve characters that are even more recognizable aren't?
Wider appeal, I guess. At the moment, zombies are hot. It's good storytelling, it's good acting, high production values. It has a lot going for it. It's also non-genre specific in a way. With a lot of those other shows, the Flash TV show that failed, the Amazing Spider-Man show from the 70s, they were always focused on superheroes. And you're seeing a lot more of these shows now branch off from that. They don't have to be Superman and Batman and the Avengers. You can do other types of genres that have been in comics for years and years and years. But production value, story, those are the two key elements right now.
The one thing about The Walking Dead is that, it has zombies in it, but Robert Kirkman, who started this whole phenomena. All his stories are not focused on the zombie part. It's all about human interaction, about who's going to survive, the instinct of survival, and what's going to happen. And that's what I think the mass appeal of this show is that how are these people, after their whole world has been kind of destroyed, and they have these walkers walking around trying to get them, but how are they going to survive? And I think that's the main tug point for people to watch the show.
Character-driven stories. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the tried and true way of doing a story, and it still works.
I think you guys are both fans of the show as well as the comic books. You know them. What do you think needs to change for them? Because I know they've branched a little bit off from the original comics and are still kind of staying on board with them. Where do we think we're going? Because I know if we're talking TV time, we're only in the first or second print of Walking Dead comics, so there's still a lot more to come.
They're at about volume 4 or 5 in the graphic novel, but they have to change things from the TV show to the graphic novel or comic book, because otherwise you're not going to get the people that read that stuff. You're not going to get them to watch a TV show because they're going to know what happens already.
It's the Sin City thing. Sin City came out as a movie in the theaters, and it was very cool, and it looked exactly like Sin City, and the words they were speaking was exactly what you read in Sin City. On the downside, there was nothing there new there for me. I've seen it there before, exactly. That's not new. Walking Dead, however, even though I've read all the comics, I know where the comics go, it's still a new experience. The backbone of the story is the same, the framework's there, but they're able to diverge from that and make me guess and second guess what's going to actually happen with these characters in the show. It's a very cool experience to have, and it's a great selling tool when people come in and look for the comic. I can tell them
it's not the same.
It's not the same. It's different enough.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's really caused, even in people that I interact with, things like that haven't been huge comic book people at all, but all of a sudden, this Walking Dead shows up, and AMC's done a great job with everything there. So have you guys seen that as well, of people kind of...
Absolutely. It's the little comic that could. Every time I think, well, that's it, it's peaked as far as many readers as we can get. The show comes back on or something big happens in it, and you get a whole new crop of readers. And the nice thing with that book is the way it's written, it comes out in what they call trade paperbacks whenever they finish a storyline. It's very episodic in the single issues in the trade paperbacks. So, every time I think it's out, they keep getting more and more readers. It's good to see.
Same for you, I assume that
it's amazing, because I do, like, at the end of the year, I look at my numbers and say, okay, what's the top selling graphic novel? And at least for the last 4 or 5 years, the first volume of Walking Dead has been by far the top seller of my store. So somebody is always coming in and wanting to read it, and that's great, because there's a lot of people. Television offers such a wide audience that knows nothing about comic books. So then they're like, oh, this isn't a graphic novel, and then all of a sudden they stumble upon our store, and they open the door and they're like, I watched The Walking Dead. And then, okay, well, have you read any of the books? No. Well, boom.
And the interesting thing there too is Walking Dead is probably the one comic on the screen thing that has actually been able to cross over, where it brings those new people in, whereas Avengers makes a bajillion dollars, Dark Knight Rises makes $1 billion, Spider-Man, we don't see a lot of bump from that from outside customers. It's pretty much what's already there, but Walking Dead brings people in the store, and that's just amazing to me.
And do you think what else could come along at this point? We've seen so much TV shows come and rise and fall with the ups and downs. Walking Dead actually they have a crazy fan following now. We're starting to see the influx from TV fans too.
I think at a much smaller scale, but I think now you're seeing in the United States, Doctor Who. Doctor Who is starting to really bring in those people that watch the show on TV. Not everybody has BBC America, so they're like, oh, what's Doctor Who? But it's a wider audience than what an individual store has to offer. So when somebody comes walking into our store and then they see a Doctor Who, they're like, oh my gosh, they make a comic book or a graphic novel on Doctor Who? Yeah, or you have this toy, or you have this. And so Doctor Who, not to the extent of Walking Dead, but it's climbing.
They have their fans.
They have their fans.
They definitely they have a pretty strong fan base too, I believe.
I mean, that's that cult, fan thing that was around for so many years, and then about 10 years ago when when they started doing the new seasons or new series of Doctor Who, suddenly was available to a much wider audience in the Americas. So, yeah, he's probably right. Yeah, that's probably the next thing.
No, it's just an interesting thought to kind of think about and see where we're progressing from what has happened, what's going to be happening, things like that. Back to more comic-driven, into the new Avengers. The return of the Illuminati has been huge. How have you seen that impact readers? People complaining, liking different things.
It's still pretty fresh as far as the return of it. I don't think it's really hit people just yet. I think the Illuminati need to do something big, actually something rather big, either happen or is just about to happen with them, that could get people talking again. But as far as setting up some storylines in the Marvel Universe, it has absolute potential. It's done it before, and the way the group works with being the secret runners of basically everything in the Marvel Universe, a lot of untapped potential.
I'm a big fan of the Illuminati just because you have the secret society that sees the future and what's coming down the pike.
That's our show for today. I want to thank our guest, Kurt Wood of Collector's Edge Comics, Craig Lopasinski of Neptune Comics. I'm your host, Zachary Kunde. For everyone here at Inside the Cover, good night.